Hello, everybody. Welcome to the latest edition of CNF Talks, in which we interview speakers at our forthcoming events. Today, it's my great pleasure to have with me Vivienne Artz, OBE, Data Strategy and Privacy Policy Advisor at the Centre for Information Policy Leadership. Vivienne's going to be speaking at our event, Data and the Future of Financial Services Summit, on the 19th of June in London. Welcome, Vivienne.
Hello, Morris, and I'm so looking forward to the event on the 19th of June.
Thank you. Let's turn to our first question. In a recent speech, the FCA CEO said that big tech is a priority as the watchdog looks to make use of the vast swathes of data that the likes of Google, Amazon, Apple, Microsoft, and Meta have access to. Do you agree with him that this will result in improved products, more competitive prices, and greater options for consumers and businesses?
Morris, it's an excellent question. It might help just to put a little bit into context. So the comments by the FCA CEO were in response to a consultation paper that was presented to industry last year, and they just published the results of that last month in April, actually. And the theme was really around data asymmetry. As we know, the financial services sector has a lot of data, but it is limited in how it can use that data. Big tech has an enormous amount of data over which they are quite proprietary, but it's a data asymmetry, different types of data, different quantities of data, regulated in different ways, i.e. financial services is and big tech isn't. So the question is, what does that data asymmetry mean? So in that consultation paper, they looked at 5 key themes. So they looked at the potential for big tech to enhance the overall value of their ecosystem with further entry and expansion into retail financial services. So for example, we can already see the ingress of Google Pay, Apple Pay. Consumers like it. It's innovative. You just use your phone. In fact, you can go everywhere with just your phone. It's extraordinary. This has started off as a partnership initially, but obviously the FCA is interested to know whether it'll end up having a bigger long-term impact, i.e. will it move from a partnership to a more unbalanced relationship? And they're also concerned about what this impact will look like. Is it going to be progressive and sequential, or are there going to be peaks and troughs? Is it going to be predictable, or are there going to be big market shifts that needs to be considered as a regulator? They're also obviously looking for the benefit to consumers through innovation and competition, but will that actually take place? And then they're needing to consider the longer term risks. If there is an entrenched market power of the big tech firms, is that going to be healthy for competition, or is it actually going to have the other impact, which is it's actually going to impair consumer outcomes, which wouldn't be great. So the FCA is looking how to incentivize data sharing between big tech and financial firms through the open banking and open finance network, which makes an awful lot of sense. I would just contextualize that this is actually about retail rather than wholesale data markets at the moment, but they really need to be considering the competition aspect. So the comments and the outcomes of that paper, there is still more work to do, but we can see the themes, and it's about, is this going to work for consumers or not?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in principle, it certainly could, given the vast amounts of data and the types of products that could be developed. I mean, generative AI has already had an enormous impact on society and on financial services in particular. What challenges to data privacy does Gen AI bring with it? And how can these be handled? And how will generative AI-powered analytics unlock insights for banking, payments, insurance, and asset management?
So we're very taken with generative AI, but generative AI is a subset of AI. The financial services sector, of course, has been using AI for many, many years, but they've been using it in the analytical and deductive sense, as opposed to the creative sense of generative AI. The challenges, I think, are increasingly well understood. One of the biggest is actually around generative AI is how do you train generative AI? What is the legal basis? How do we address intellectual property rights? Generative AI is trained with large language models across the internet on publicly available data, but just because it's out there doesn't mean you're allowed to use it, that it's not protected by intellectual property or contract law or confidentiality, or in fact that it's personal data. And if it's personal data, what is the legal basis for processing? Is legitimate interest sufficient? We've got other issues, of course, around security, transparency. How do we understand how those models actually work? And how do we explain that to people? Nobody wants black box decision making. That's terrifying. There's the issue around individual rights. If you think about how in a large language model do you either remove your data or correct your data? Once it's in there and it's been used to train, how do you get it back out? I just don't know if that's even possible. And of course, the big one is in relation to bias. We've seen that one of the things about AI is it has the ability to amplify the existing biases. So it's so important that we're training with the right data and the algorithms are right, and that we anticipate those unintended consequences. So what are the potentials for the financial services sector? Well, I think they're looking very closely at the possibilities for improving the customer experience and engagement, so the chatbot isn't as irritating as it is today, but actually gets much more personalized and intuitive. They're looking at generative AI to personalize products, to reduce risk, to better identify fraud, and also to better anticipate client needs. So there's been a lot of use of AI already. Generative AI with its creative capabilities offers a lot of opportunities, but that still needs to be explored in a trusted environment before we can let it loose, I think, on consumers. But the possibilities are there. We just have to do it responsibly.
Absolutely. So a whole host of issues, really. But I suppose, it's in the foothills, in its infancy. And as matters progress, these issues will ultimately be resolved. Another interesting technology, of course, is blockchain. And presumably blockchain technology with its immutable record keeping of financial data is to be welcomed in terms of data protection. Is this true, or does it bring with it any risks when it comes to data and how it's handled?
Oh, it's a really excellent question. And I have to say, I'm so looking forward to the event because we are going to be covering such an incredible range of ground. The immutability is terrific because it provides perfect auditability. But if it's always there forever, how do you correct it? What if it's wrong? You can record that a change has taken place, but actually, if you think about individual subject rights, what is the deletion opportunity? It isn't there. So it raises a whole group of new and interesting challenges for privacy, because privacy is, the legislation has evolved along the basis of an assumption that there is going to be some element of centralized control. And of course, with so many blockchain technologies, the point is that it is decentralized. So if there's an issue, who do you go to? That's really very big. The issue around data minimization, its strength is in the fact that nobody holds, or no one place holds, that golden record. Actually, it's duplicated all over. So there's an element of assurance there, but that means there's copies everywhere. So how do we address data minimization? The security at the moment, as we know, is not very consistent, which is unfortunate. And then, it's digital. It's crosses borders all the time. So how do we deal with cross-border data transfers when the obligations are becoming increasingly challenging around analysis and documenting and putting in place agreements and so on and so forth? The data's flowing. It's just flowing anyway. And I think the final thing is really who gets to enforce it. So how do we assess the cross-border enforcement capabilities? Is it just because it's the individual who's in your jurisdiction? Is it because that's where a server is? Is it because that's where the overall organizer is established? Or is it just one of the users is established in your jurisdiction? Who is going to regulate this, and on what basis?
So again, technology with a huge number of issues yet to be resolved. Moving on in technologies, that's something which perhaps is slightly in the future, although it's coming down the track very fast, I'm told by the experts. Are you concerned about the acceleration in quantum computing and the threat it poses to public key, private key cryptography in the longer term? And do you think, although it may be a little way off, do you think that the industry is doing enough by way of preparation?
Well, quantum computing is so very exciting, and honestly, I find it quite difficult to get my head around it sometimes. But the reality is that all new technology poses new challenges. So the context here really is that threat actors effectively could store encrypted information now and then decrypt it in future when there is sufficient quantum computing power to break those codes. And you know, for some things that's less of an issue because actually the value of the data erodes over time. But for information that needs to be protected for a longer period of time, then yes, actually this does pose a very, very real risk, the possibility that this could be the information could be decrypted in future by threat actors. So it is real, but I'm a glass half full person rather than a glass half empty, and that we are always very innovative, and frankly, necessity is the mother of innovation. So what's interesting to see is if you actually have a look out there, a huge number of companies and the whole of the cryptographic community is actually developing and preparing for quantum resistant cryptographic algorithms. And that's what we're going to need. So is it moving fast enough? Who knows? We've no idea how quickly quantum is going to be with us in a scalable and accessible way, but I think we've identified the threat, and there is a lot of activity already taking place to figure out ways in which we can address it. So hopefully our cryptographic community is going to get there first.
Very good, positive note. For our viewers, if you'd like to hear more on these issues and to hear from Vivienne, who's also chairing the event, please do have a look at our website, www.cityandfinancial.com, for details of the data and the Future of Financial Services Summit being held in London on the 19th of June. Vivienne, thank you so much for joining us today. That was a fascinating discussion.
My absolute pleasure. I look forward to seeing you on the 19th of June.
Same here.